Welcome to Anything and Nothing podcast, where we talk about a little bit of anything and a whole lot of nothing. Today, I've got Dr. Fisher back again with me. Welcome, Dr. Fisher.
Welcome to me, and for you to be welcome. You and me both being here together.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you.
Stumbled around and got that out.
No, you're good. Glad to have you back. So today, I wanted to bring Dr. Fisher back just so we could discuss a little further some of his experiences and, get into the AI stuff a little bit more, because I thought that it was a good conversation and I just wanted to kind of extend it. So again, thank you again for coming on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So first I wanted to get into your past a little bit, and we talked a little bit about your military experience. I know you were a Marine, is that correct?
Yep.
So what exactly did you do in the Marines?
Well, I'll start with what I did after I got assigned to active duty.
Yeah.
In Camp Pendleton,
Okay.
California, as a second lieutenant.
Okay.
And what I was assigned as a second lieutenant was, my first duty was in Baker Company in the 81 millimeter mortar attachment to that rifle company.
Okay.
So I was an 81 millimeter mortar
Okay.
platoon leader.
Gotcha.
That was my assignment. And then I met the 1st Marine Division when it returned from Korea.
Okay.
And I met it actually literally marching down the street in San Diego when it got off the ship.
Right.
And the companies by battalions were marching through the city and being welcomed. That's where I first saw my 1st Marine Division.
Oh, okay.
So they were just back from Korea.
I gotcha.
And then they located on the camp,
Right.
Camp Pendleton, and took up there. And that's where then I went on the site to meet my 81 millimeter mortar platoon.
Okay.
So that was my first assignment.
Right. So you were active duty then, right? Like you were actively engaged in war at that time?
No, I was on active duty. But as I mentioned, the 1st Marine Division had just come back from Korea.
Gotcha.
And they were then stationed at Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
And hence, a daily and weekly training schedule was followed.
Right.
But that was, I call that playing war.
Yeah.
My predecessors, they had actually been in war.
Gotcha.
So I had the benefit of two or three officers that I could kind of talk with about being actually in war.
Right.
But I never did. I played war a lot.
Okay. Hey, nothing wrong with that, and thank you again for your service. I did want to ask, how did that experience kind of shape your life, though?
Well, as we talked the last time, the first shaping I can claim was done by the DIs in boot camp. And by the shaping, I mean they didn't put me in ice water, but I counted for some of the things they did.
Yeah.
And I being a farm kid, I wasn't very rebellious. I was pretty much a kid that grew up on a farm and did chores, didn't ask questions.
Right.
And so I was a good follower.
Yeah.
And hence I was a pretty good follower. I was a good follower in boot camp. And hence I learned, though, the value of taking orders and then also the value of knowing how to give orders.
Right.
So I'd say there I learned a lot how to take orders, which it wasn't hard for me to do because I just tacitly took orders.
Right, right.
But then how to give orders.
Did it happen to like, were you routine oriented before then? Did it kind of structure your life in that way?
I was already routined.
Okay.
And by that I mean, as a farm kid, chores, I'm talking, coming home from school and doing an hour and a half chores.
Right.
And so I was already in a routine, and even though I was out of college then, the whole notion of routine for that kind of thing wasn't new to me.
Right. Yeah, I think routine's super important for anyone with any type of goal orientation.
Sure.
So that I was kind of curious if you had that going into it, or if it was something that you attained in that.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to ask, and it may not be anything in it, but I know there's a lot of talk about folks seeing things like, like secretive type things or something from a military perspective, that secret technology, did you ever experience anything like that, or everything was pretty straightforward with what you were doing?
I wasn't much into understanding even much about what secrecy was in warfare.
Right.
That comes down back generally into intelligence gathering.
Right. Yeah.
And the only place, I knew about stuff like that in officers training school.
Right.
But secrecy wasn't much. Everything was out in the open, pretty clear for me for those 2 years.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, I didn't know. I mean, I know that I feel like 90% positive that our government has weapons of war and things to that nature that they're not exposing, obviously.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't know if how far back, because I mean, the things, the jets that we have, the equipment that we have, like is far superior to what we see our enemies have or other countries have, except say for maybe China. And I was just curious, like even back then, I'm sure back then they had things too that people weren't privy to.
Well, I can reflect back, especially at my age now.
Yeah.
And my educative experiences.
Right.
A lot since then.
Yeah.
And then be able to reflect back and make inferences.
Yeah.
About what was going on then secretly.
Yeah.
We, as well as what's going on, we can infer now.
Yeah.
And how that secrecy is a necessary condition.
100%.
For winning in military battles.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even when we get into like the conversation of AI,
yes,
like they're implementing that in the warfare now too.
Sure.
And I don't know if we talked about this the last time or not, but there was I saw somewhere where they were saying the AI was pushing back on being used as a weapon, like not necessarily pushing back, but it was asked about how it felt about being used in warfare, and it wasn't, obviously it was, maybe it's just the language model, the way it was trained, but it was basically saying it wasn't super happy about being implemented in that manner.
Well, I think we can take the inference out of what an artificial intelligent machine
right
says.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's all been programmed to say something.
That's right.
By humans.
Yep.
Who know what they're programming into it. So what's programmed into that machine I use reflect.
Right.
What the humans are programming into it.
So that's kind of like the ethics of the human bleeding into the programming of the bot.
Yeah. Their ethics is bleeding into, and that's where I like to pick on it.
Yeah.
Some of the ethics part of that.
Right. That's curious.
But they bleed into it.
Yeah.
And humans bleeding it into the bots.
Right. Yeah. And we'll dig into that too, like I said, in the second half of what we're doing here.
Sure.
And for folks to be aware kind of what the plan is, I wanted to bring him back on the podcast, have a regular conversation a little bit about what we got going on, and then I want to take him on my personal podcast, and we're going to talk. We're going to have a discussion with AI, so it should be pretty interesting.
Good enough.
But anyhow, that being said, so I know Mr. Love, your son that introduced me to you, he said that there were some things like back in your history. I mean, when I met Mr. Love, just full transparency, I kind of expected you to be a black man. I didn't know you were white. You know what I mean?
Well, that'd be a reasonable inference. Yeah.
So he said you had some experiences with like racism and things of that nature.
Oh yeah.
What are your views on racism now, and has it changed over the years?
Well, I'm going to speak on that this way. The 40-some years ago, I used the word smitten. Yeah. With me being smitten by Barbara's sons on the Southern Illinois University campus. Yeah. And that smittenness leading to Barbara and me getting married. Right. As an interracial couple. Right. Back then, I knew that she and I were not anywhere near the norm.
Right.
There wasn't much of that interracial couple marriages being done then. And my inference was, by now, looking back and I remember thinking, well, in the future, interracial marriages will become more common,
yeah,
and more accepted,
for sure,
more valued, and contribute significantly in their being accepted,
yeah,
into the democracy that we're experimenting with.
Yeah.
Now I look from my age now and looking back, that integration and the marriages between interracial married African American and Europe, it hasn't evolved as quite as much,
right,
as I thought it would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you last time or if we've had this discussion before at all, as far as like race relations or race and relationships is concerned. But I've only been married once. My wife was Jamaican.
Okay.
So I was in.
You consider that interracial?
I mean, she was a black woman, yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
And you know, I will say though, getting to the do I consider it interracial, I'm gonna pull a U card on you.
Yeah, let's do it.
When you're looking, something I was considering after our conversation, when you look at the term race, like the human race is the only race from a.
Well, let's get technical on the language. Let's get analytical, philosophical.
Yeah, you see where I'm going with it.
You're picking on the word race.
You see where I'm going with it.
I do, and I admire it.
Yeah,
sure.
So what are your thoughts around that? Because like for me, you know, when I grew up, as I was growing up, and I want to get into more of what you experienced as well. But you know, there was no mention of race in my upbringing, so it wasn't even something that I thought about until I started dating outside of my race, and and some of my extended family.
Yes.
And I experienced some of that. Like they're like, you know, that pushback on what I was doing. Which I didn't care. I'm a teenager at the time. I don't care what y'all think. No, you know what I'm saying? And my parents supported me.
Well, sure.
But you know, whenever I look at the term race, one of the people that I've watched like through social media and things of that nature said it kind of eloquently that we're all the human race. We're just different shades.
Yeah.
So break down like the for me the literacy of it in your philosophical terms with the nomenclature and if you can.
I can.
If you know what I'm asking.
Yeah, I do. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pick on the meaning of the word race and then use it for our conversation here with a uni meaning.
Right.
Such that we don't talk about the African race.
Right.
Or the European race.
Right.
We don't use the meaning of the word race that way. But just talk about the human race.
There you go.
Because that was implicit in what you were saying.
Right.
And then if and when you do that, then all the different colors of skin that have evolved in big history over thousands of years on planet Earth, here, then we're all of the same race with different skin colors.
Right.
That's the first point.
Yeah.
Then, beside the cultural differences, the first thing is to wonder, well, how come on planet Earth have all of these skin colors evolved to be in different shapes?
Right.
With brown, black, yellow, etc., and even shapes of faces.
Right.
So there's physical characteristics of our organic existence.
Yes.
Not inorganic.
Yeah.
Organic existence of those all races then come from one place and have changed because of physical circumstances.
Yeah. Do you think that so so that kind of assigns evolution to the responsibility for the development of the different races?
Yes, it does.
Is that kind of your viewpoint of what happened?
Sure it is.
Okay.
Well, let me speak on that.
Yeah.
Darwinian evolution. That was a 20th century biological science,
Right.
call it discovery, by Darwin
Yeah.
and all his work. So in the 20th century, Western world philosophy, that science developed.
Yeah.
And it developed as far as just the physical character and the culture.
Right.
So evolution has been in the language system since the 20th century. But since the 21st century, and with cosmology that we have now, and by that I mean the science of the universe
Yeah.
that we have available now with the Big Bang, etc., then evolution fits into a bigger history
Yeah.
than it did in the 20th century.
Right.
And that's the position I take.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. My curiosity with that is, again, I'm not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
My curiosity is probably the way I would put it around that whole thing is like, how long does it take for a species to evolve to such drastically different, means? And maybe you're aware of some studies to that nature, and I'm not at all. I haven't actually spent any time looking into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But do you have any idea, like, kind of the time frame it takes for
No,
something
I don't.
like that?
See, you're asking a temporal question.
Yeah.
How long does it take for something to
Yeah.
change?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that is a question that in contemporary can be answered by specific scientists.
Right.
And I'm probably some of us doing that.
Right.
But what I'm focusing on right now is whatever the time was, it's empirically observable
For sure.
that there have been changes.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Different changes of shape, different changes of color
Yeah.
over thousands of years
Right.
since the humans, 40 or 300,000 years ago or so, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I focus on the fact there's change and then leave it up to the science to answer those questions.
For sure.
Yeah.
So getting back to like your experience with it, and I have experienced some forms of racism
Yes.
on both sides of the coin.
Yes.
From black culture and from white culture.
Sure.
Being involved in interracial relationships.
Yeah.
My entire adult life, I just recently started dating outside of black women. Now I'm dating a Thai woman.
Okay. All right.
But
in Thailand or here in the United States?
A bit of both. But
Well, now, have you dated a Thai woman here in the United States?
no, not.
No, your Thai woman dating has been in Thailand.
Yeah, there you go.
Now there's a difference there because a Thai woman a woman from Thailand
Over here, yeah.
Here, she's going to pick up habits that the Thailand woman in Thailand doesn't have yet.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get westernized. I've dated a Korean woman over here, and they
Yeah.
experienced exactly
Yeah,
that. So
sure. They'll be getting a little more assertive over here.
Yeah, you're
than
in
they
line.
will at home.
you're right. Yeah, it's a totally different culture. And,
It is.
So that kind of what I was going to ask you about,
Yeah.
though, as far as the racism is concerned, what do you think drives that?
What do I think? What?
What do you think drives like racism? and-
Ignorance.
Ignorance.
Yeah, that's my first answer, ignorance. But that's duh.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, but my general answer to that I'm working with, and maybe we get into it more, is that they've had miseducative experiences.
Yeah.
And in contrast to educative experiences.
Right.
So I make a discernment between educative experiences humans have and miseducative experiences. And then I use, that's right out of Dewey's logic and philosophy of education.
Yeah. We'll get into Dewey for sure.
Yeah.
I know you're writing a book using his philosophy.
Yes.
So my take on it, I wanted to hear your kind of your thoughts on it before I gave you my take, because I don't want to skew you at all.
Sure.
But my take on it is, I think it originated from tribalism. Like when you think about evolution and how folks evolve over time, it's not just the physical characteristics and things of that nature that evolve.
Yeah.
So I think that we came up in these tribes, these groups of people that were all similar. And then now later on, that is kind of baked into our DNA, to say, not really our DNA, but our psyche as well.
Yeah.
that that tribalism aspect. So when folks are seeing people step outside of that, they push that resistance onto it. That's just kind of my take on like where it originates from.
May I push around that take a little bit?
For sure.
And let me ask you a question. So you're starting this part of our conversation with the fact that humans have organized themselves into tribes.
Yeah.
And say, well, that was an early way humans organized themselves.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but were there humans before they had organized into tribes?
That's a good question.
Well, and the plausible answer to that is yes, and that's hunter and gatherers.
Right.
So the hunter and gatherer term is usually used to refer to usually family groups with a male and female that have some kids and maybe 2 or 3 families, hunting and gathering, which implies they were always on the move, out within the continent of Africa, and then eventually out of the continent of Africa in various ways.
Yeah.
So I'm making a distinction between, for this conversation, between hunter and gatherers, and then the hunter and gatherers some of them settling into agricultural places.
Right.
Usually around rivers, but even around the Mediterranean Sea.
For sure.
All right. But then when they settled into and begin to raise food, instead of hunt and find it, begin to raise it, that's when tribes or organizations of groups begin to do stuff and collect food and try to protect food and land.
Yep.
So you get into it with tribe. But humans were moving around a lot before tribes.
Yeah,
that's my claim. Yeah.
Right. There's actually a recent, not super recent, but I read an article a while back. It was talking about there was a hunter-gatherer type tribe in South America that had they showed that they had capabilities of agriculture, like knowledge of agriculture that they would take with them from space to space, but they still didn't form that community in one position like we do today. You know what I mean?
Call it a tribe?
Yeah.
You're circumventing the word tribe in your talk there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. You're going around the bush.
Right. Yeah. They didn't. Yeah. I didn't want to explicitly say tribe because technically speaking, a tribe can be, when you think of Indians that were traveling, and America or wherever it was, and other tribes, like they traveled. They were hunter gatherers and tribes then too, and I think the tribal aspect of it was more so of a protection element against outsiders.
Well, and protection in place culturally implies conflict.
Yeah.
So the meaning of the word tribe, the way we're using it, it implies conflict.
Yeah.
Whereas the meaning of the phrase hunter and gatherers does not necessarily imply.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hunting and gathering is more so for self-sustainment.
It does.
And I think that conflict arises from other groups trying to take from other groups.
To take something from somebody.
Yeah.
But if you're hunter and gatherers, you don't have anything.
Yeah.
It's all out there someplace.
Yeah.
After you settle down and do your agriculture thing.
Maybe that's
then
why
you have food and stuff and land you want to. That's mine. That's where my individual protection comes in.
Right. I mean, this could be why they found that tribe that had access to agriculture that decided not to set in one position. It's harder to hit a moving target type thing. You know what I mean?
They move. Well, they can't move the land.
Yeah, they can't move the land.
They can move what they do on the land.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what they were talking about them doing is not hunter and gathering.
Yeah.
We're talking about growing food,
right?
Plants and animals.
Yeah.
Those are the two things they do with plants and animals.
Herding animals and growing plants and things of that nature. Yeah.
Certainly.
So I took us down
farmers, and I'm an old farmer.
Yeah. I took us down a bit of a rabbit hole there, but in the context of
tell me what you mean by a little bit of a rabbit hole right there.
So I was trying to talk about I was trying to get us on the topic of the your experience as far as the race relations were concerned.
Let me get right to it then.
Yeah.
All right. We can move from the whole notion of hunter and gatherers and tribes except in a metaphorical sense. We don't talk about tribes
Right.
of here in the United States.
Yeah.
All right. But there are groups of people who organize them. We still organize.
Yeah.
Well, my most explicit case of racism, this is the major one,
Mm-hmm.
was when Barbara and I were teaching after I'd been smitten and come to South Carolina, and then took a job. I took a job at teaching at Richland County School District 1, teaching science.
Right.
And she was in Richland 1, teaching elementary school. And after teaching science at in secondary schools in Columbia, South Carolina, I retooled myself to teach elementary school because I wanted to get to Eastover,
Yeah.
a town near Columbia, to the elementary middle school that was there. It was in the rural area.
Right.
I tailored myself and actually got employed as a middle teacher at that Eastover elementary and middle school.
Right.
I taught science there and coached basketball. And then after doing that for 2 years or so, I'll mention this, that driving back and forth from Columbia, I decided, and Barbara and I decided to buy a house, buy property in Eastover.
Right.
So we did. And we bought a nice big plot where a senator had his house. So I bought a nice plot
Yeah.
with a big house and was in the act of refurbishing it
Yeah.
and ready to move into it. The next day, I'd had the furniture moved, etc. And the night before Barb and I were going to move with our kids, 2 kids, grandkids,
Yeah.
to that property in Eastover, I got a call from a friend in Eastover in the middle of the night saying, "Your house is on fire."
Oh man.
Well, so I went out there and the house was on fire.
Wow.
So there was arson,
Yeah.
and we knew who did it.
Yeah.
All right, and it was a neighbor.
Yeah.
The neighbor who I'd hired to help me do a little work on my ground, etc.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so there was a blatant example of racism.
Right.
These white guys didn't want this white guy and that black woman with those 2 kids living in that house
Right.
in Eastover.
How did you guys deal with that?
Oh, hell, I don't. Well, I think the answer to that is feeling. I wasn't anger.
Yeah.
I've been over that already.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt, let me say, I felt sorry
Yeah.
for 2 things. Number one, for the people the old boy that I knew set the fire, built the kindling and set the fire.
Yeah.
I knew who it was.
Right.
And the second thing I felt sad about, that's the word, sad, for him, but also for the whole investigative process that was done by the local police that didn't indict who they knew did it.
Yeah.
So there was a conspiracy kind of thing going on there.
Yeah.
I was saddened by all that.
Yeah.
And then just went through the long process of getting insurance
Yeah. Yeah.
and getting the property sold, and
How did Barbara take it? Like, what was her reaction to the whole thing?
sad.
Yeah. Just same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No anger or frust, just sad.
Yeah.
It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So how did you, did you end up moving to a different area or?
No, I continued to teach out there, but then driving back and forth,
Right.
and then wound up teaching back in Columbia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
In the Richland 1.
yeah. I think when you talk about the topic of racism,
Yes.
I firmly believe that it is a taught thing. I don't think it's
Thinkers of what now?
it's taught.
Oh, yeah. it's not part of a curriculum anyway, overtly.
Yeah, I mean more so
yeah.
through like family dynamic and things of that nature.
Yes, it is. Yes, I agree.
And I say that because I mentioned my Jamaican ex-wife.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember we bought bikes to exercise on.
Yes.
And my neighbor 2 doors down called my wife because I was at work. I work every day.
Yeah.
I was even like that back then.
Yeah, sure.
But he called my wife and said, "Hey, somebody's taking your bikes."
Okay.
And so she jumped in the car, called the police, and chased them down the street and stopped them.
Okay.
And they were like, I'll never forget what she told me. She said that they told her.
Now, who's they? The police?
The people that took the bikes. The
people
kids
that took the
kids
bikes.
that took the bikes.
Yeah.
The police got there, stopped them. But she stopped them like, "Hey, why'd you steal my bikes?"
Yeah.
And the kids told her, "Sorry, we thought it was white people that lived there." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean?"
Okay.
Like,
oh
so
boy, there's an implied ethics there.
Yeah.
You know, they've been taught or learned. They've acquired. They've been miseducated.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yes.
They were educated by whoever their
Yes.
parents were that it was okay because
steal from the white folk, but don't steal from the black folk.
Right.
In that particular case.
Yeah, and my wife, my ex-wife, I should say.
Yeah.
She was she was pretty adamant. Like the cops, like, "You want to press charges?" Yeah, you know what I mean. She was.
Well, it's a sad state of affairs, but I confer her feelings wasn't so much sad.
No, she was not
be
sad at all.
Resentment and a little bit of anger and hate in it.
She was extremely angry and extremely upset.
Yes.
And I could tell that she was flabbergasted when she heard what they said, and I was just like, well,
it is comical now.
Yeah.
You know, it's tragic humor, really.
Yeah.
If you go Greek on it, it's tragic, but it's humorous.
Yeah, I mean,
until it ain't, you know, in our political system, you're getting past humor into, deathly situations.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think race is a bad word to describe.
I do too.
I think ethnicity, maybe.
Yes, that's a better word.
But
yes, I agree.
Yeah, I'm just not real sure. Again, from my upbringing, I didn't know racism was a thing until my first experience with it.
Yeah.
So
well, I didn't either.
What was your first experience with it?
Well, my first experience with racism was when I was become aware of it was when I was in college.
Yeah.
At Kansas State Teachers, which I reviewed.
Yeah.
And I was a member of the basketball team and the track team. And there were 3 African Americans on the basketball team, came from Kansas City, Kansas.
Yeah.
We call them the Kansas City, Kansas Kitties.
Yeah.
All right. And I got friendly with. I liked to play against them and with them, when we were just playing around. And then the guy that was track team. Now, I mention that because I noticed that the coaches didn't use the black guys for basketball at all. And they did use the the young man for track, but it was just so obvious he was better than anybody at that.
Yeah.
All right, so that's where I began to notice something about racism.
Yeah.
Until then, I didn't know I hadn't experienced it.
So your upbringing, it wasn't really mentioned at all either. It was
no. This little town in Cedar Point where my dad went to was farmer, and I grew up as a kid on the farm.
Yeah.
In that little school. Well, there weren't any black folk there at all anyhow.
Right.
There were only brown folk.
Yeah.
And the brown folks were Mexicans.
Right.
Who lived in the huts on the railroad. So there's the only place I knew became regularly associated with parents and their children with anybody had a different than a white skin.
Gotcha.
Yeah, brown skin, white skin. Yeah.
Was there any type of overt racism that you observed against the Mexican folk?
No, but I claim there was racism against me. And here's how I got that. Because the 2 young men who were Mexican guys came to school in that little town. The parents lived in the huts up on the railroad.
Yeah.
Frank, and I can't forget the other one. But Frank, that was when Percy James and I, my neighbor on the farm, we would ride bikes or walk to school.
Right.
So we'd walk to school and walked home from school.
Yeah.
And of course, Frank and his brother walked to the railroad.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so I mentioned that because it came to a time when Frank said to Percy James and me, Frank and his brother, we're going to beat you up when you walk home from school today.
Yeah.
So there was a threat directly to me at that point. All right, so when I got out of school and walked, we walked very carefully and looking around the corners, but no physical action ever took.
Okay. How did your experiences, like, did they mold your perception of reality or your thoughts around, humanity in general at all, or did you just?
You mean such experience I had with Frank?
Frank, the people that burned your house down, all that stuff.
Well, by the time I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And taking care of my grandchildren, raising my grandchildren. So I don't use the word mold my belief.
Yeah.
I've had acquired beliefs by thinking out.
Right.
To mold suggests that there is something physical that enters and then it's set.
Right.
And I don't use that as an analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I acquire beliefs and choose to believe and then practice believing that and see what the consequences. That's a different way of talking about how we believe things.
Right.
To believe. So by the time when the house was burned down, I said we're sad.
Yeah.
So I just practiced not being resentful or angry by that time.
Yeah. It's kind of hard.
It works.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to be, sad and angry at the same time, especially against somebody you don't really know that well.
Well, you can't. It's pretty hard to be that. You have to practice being one or the other.
Yeah.
And if you can, I could have continued practice being angry.
Right.
That's a choice humans make.
Yeah, for sure.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
You choose. You can't choose your environment or your situation or your circumstances, but you can choose how you react.
Well,
to
you
it.
can choose your environment.
Yeah.
You change your environment when you go to Thailand.
Thailand, you're right. Yep.
And so there's choice there.
Yeah.
So a person can, if you begin to understand the environment affects it, you, and you affect the environment, and if you're having certain kind of issues with yourself, experiencing problems, then maybe the best thing to do is to think about, changing your environment.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I get where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
I meant more so like the way you react to certain things, I think.
Yeah.
But
that way, the vague term way.
Yeah. How you react to the external events that occur in your life.
And how it reacts to you.
Right.
It and you to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mentioned because that's Dewey's pragmatism.
Yeah.
There's interaction all the time going on. We're not we're sentient beings.
Right.
And we're doing that, but we don't consciously focus on that.
Yeah.
American pragmatism is the Western world philosophy that tried to bring that into focus.
Right. So that's a very good segue, because I wanted to talk a little bit about how you got introduced into the principles Dewey has. Like, what brought you to his works?
Well, my first awareness of the name John Dewey was when I was doing graduate studies after I got out of the Marine Corps and took a job teaching at a local high school, and was doing graduate studies in the summer and after school, and working on my master's degree and taking the course Methods of Research.
Okay.
And I mentioned that because it was in that course that I was introduced to the whole notion of what we now call the scientific method.
Right.
And for doing research of the kind I wanted to do. And the name Dewey kept propping up within that course
Yeah.
and that book. And then, of course, after that, well, then that led me into the more general pragmatic movement in America.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's his overall arching thought process, or, you know, the structure of his work that you apply to your work?
Mm-hmm.
How do you implement what you've learned from his work into what you're doing now?
Well, I've already done it.
Okay.
I started by pointing out when we begin to talk about environment,
Mm-hmm.
when we moving from one situation to another, and human can choose to do that.
Right.
And then pointing out quickly there that I used the word interaction,
Yeah.
and that's a term that's common among everybody now.
Right.
Everybody's using the word interaction.
Yeah.
And so that's associated with Dewey
Okay.
and the whole pragmatic movement back in the 20th century.
Gotcha.
All right, but then the corollary, and another term that we can maybe get into is transaction.
Okay.
So the difference between interaction and transaction.
So what's the difference between interaction and transaction as far as you define it?
Well, the way I have already successfully, quote unquote, defined it in my first chapter of book 1,
Right.
is after, and I do this with artificial intelligence, and
Right.
I'm using Copilot now.
Okay.
All right, so Copilot is my protagonist, and I ask questions, and I judge the questions about my tacit knowledge of philosophy.
Yeah.
All right, but I'm going to use 3 terms that I have coined that I'll use to answer your question.
Okay.
The first term is the term brain/neural.
Okay.
The meaning of the word brain refers to that organ that's in the skull.
Mm-hmm.
And then neural refers to all the nervous system.
Right.
All right, so that's one line. All right. The second term that I've invented, pretty much the meaning of which of it is I call it psyche, Psyche,
Mm-hmm.
/ mental. And there's where I can separate with the use of the word brain neural.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can go to chemistry and physics and biology and talk about what is now known as exteroception, which means what seeing, hearing, smell, the organs
Yeah.
on the surface of your body do.
Mm-hmm.
Extrospection,
Okay.
that's a word they use in science
Right.
for experiencing physical things.
Okay.
Extrospection.
Like
So-
your sensory inputs.
Well, but specifically the sensory input from your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, and your skin.
Yeah.
Because there's sensory input when you go inside the body.
Right. Right.
And talk about your sense of pain
Pain.
and
Yeah.
pleasure
Hunger. Hunger be
and hunger.
Yeah.
Well, that's the word interoception
Okay.
is the language of biology now.
That's an interesting topic as well. It's something I think about a lot. I think we discussed it a little bit in the last podcast.
Yeah.
But just how people perceive and how they interact with their reality.
Yes.
So what
Now there's one more here. I
What-
want to just.
yeah, what's the
now
other
they
one?
use exteroception.
Yeah.
Interoception, but a key one that we know from biology, biochemistry,
Right.
really, is proprioception.
Proprioception.
And that's the sensory experience of human balance
Okay.
and imbalance.
Gotcha.
So those are the 3 words that are significant to understand the brain neural orientation of human experience.
Okay. So balance and imbalance.
Yeah. Body balance. Yeah.
Explain that a little bit more detailed, if you wouldn't mind. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean by that, if you have you ever gotten physically dizzy and stumble?
Yeah.
Well, you're out of balance.
I gotcha.
But when you're well coordinated and walk on a tight line, you're balanced. But your body is balanced.
Right.
You know, the gymnasts and all, they practice, their body's just trained to be balanced. So there's balance and imbalance there for the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings us to what we were discussing on the porch out there.
Yeah.
The interesting concept of cold plunge and sauna.
Yeah.
Taking your
that's skiing.
Yeah, it's externally from a sensory perception.
The water is physically outside your body.
Right. But what I was getting to was whenever you're in that cold plunge for a significant amount of time, and your body starts shivering.
Well, yeah.
Does that transfer from the external to the I forget the third term you're going.
That would still be external because your body is shivering.
Yeah.
And shivering is not a sign of being out of balance.
Yeah.
But when you shivered, if you were shivering, and you jump out of the tub and then put your feet on the ground and then
fall or something. Okay, so it's mental imbalance.
Then the balance, that would be the proprioception.
Where do you think thought comes from?
Thought. Mm-hmm. Well, let me do a switch. What do you mean by the word thought? Because that's getting into psycho stuff here.
Yeah, the psycho aspect of it. So whenever we're having the conversation and we are discussing certain topics or anything like that, like how do I get, from my perspective, how do I get to the point where I develop the question to ask you?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Those are yes.
The thought, like where's that thought come from, do you think?
Well, let me work on the word thought for just a little bit. And then, but start off with something that I'm inferring you're familiar with. And in English grammar, from English grammar, I'm inferring you've studied the declarative form of sentence. Mm-hmm. The cat is on the mat.
Yeah.
The directive, go get the cat.
Okay.
And the question or the interrogative form, where is the cat?
Yeah. And
then the emotive form is the cat. Eek! All right, so am I saying anything to you that you remember at all from your study of grammar?
No, not really.
Not really. Well, let me hold it.
It's been years and years and years since I've been in the academic aspect.
Well, but all right, well, let me go back to that. The one thing that all those sentences have in common is a subject and a predicate.
Yeah.
Now, you're familiar with subject and predicate.
For sure.
Now, why I'm getting to that is because the meaning of the word subject and predicate, if you take a word, the cat is on the mat, well, then the word, the cat is the subject, is on the mat is the predicate.
Yeah.
Now then, in grammar, that, in the grammar, from that, when the cat is, all right, so if I go internal talk and external, when I internally speak, internal thought, I say the cat is on the mat, internally.
Yeah.
Then that I have composed a thought.
Okay.
So a thought, by definition, the way we're working it, not an idea.
Yeah.
Or a notion, or a whole bunch of other things. But the way I technically do this with what a thought is, a thought is a sentence.
Okay.
Formed in internal or external speech.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. I just, I didn't know if you had some form of, if you'd ever put consideration into, and I switched away from the word thought since we're discussing the word thought.
You want to get away from that a little while. I'll bring it back. Yeah.
I know you will. But I didn't know if
you're using it now.
Yeah. I didn't
know
forming
sentences.
Right. I didn't know if you put any consideration into how the external, internal, all those different mechanisms drive thought. Like, I know from a balance equilibrium perspective, that stuff is kind of autonomous within your body.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever you're experiencing like external things, like for instance, just, to be simple, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you automatically think, oh my God, it hurts, remove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't know, if that's something that's automatic, or how you define where thought comes from. Maybe I'm thinking too deeply about it.
No, you're doing right. And I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And let me speak a little bit and see if this helps.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go to you. I'm inferring you're familiar with the two words concrete and abstract.
Yeah.
And then let me use those two meaning of those two terms to work on this situation. So let me say this. The word concrete, the way we're going to talk about it. Would you say that this table is a concrete thing or an abstract thing?
I would say concrete, but I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Well, there you go. See, you're thinking again. And probably overthinking, but you were getting to thinking a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's, in this is not psychotherapy.
Yeah.
This is a dialogue.
Right.
All right. Well, then let that be. All right. So physical things, concrete. We use the word concrete.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this thing right here that we have in front of us, would you call that an inorganic or an organic concrete thing? So
currently inorganic, but it was organic at one time.
It was. That's true. And I appreciate that, because organic, the way we know in chemistry, is can be one. The wood is once organic.
Right.
Yeah. But there are things in here that was never
Yeah.
organic.
Yeah.
And we can point at this piece of metal.
Yeah.
Okay. All of that is to use in the language we're using for a moment. The words trying to use the word concrete and the word abstract
Right.
in common.
Gotcha.
As we go along here. With that said, then, with the distinction between the physical inorganic things and physical organic things, and then I'll point there, but here.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jack. Where's Jack today?
He's in bed.
Okay, well, Jack is an organic physical thing.
Yeah.
All right. And concrete. Oh, concrete thing.
Yeah.
Oh, the way all right, now then, what if I ask you right now, do you have a mental image of Jack in your psyche?
Yeah.
Now that mental image of Jack, does it have shape and color?
Yeah.
And can it even not only have shape and color, but can it also make a sound?
Yeah, it can move, make sound.
Yes. Now that mental image of Jack, is that a physical?
It is not.
Not.
Yeah.
Well, is it fair to say it's mental?
Yeah.
All right. So there's a mental thing that I'm inferring you might even be imagining that mental image right now of Jack.
Yeah.
All right. I am too.
Yeah.
All right. But it's a mental thing.
Right.
Now, do you have any trouble calling it concrete thing?
No.
Nope. Not at all.
Yeah.
Okay, well then let me just carry this one step further in, because I do all this. This is part of chapter 1 in my book.
Right.
Go further a little bit here. I'm inferring something. That with that mental image of Jack, and notice I say in your psyche, psyche, not mind. I reserve the word mind for later. But in your psyche, the mental image exists.
Yeah.
With color, shape, and sound. And I'm inferring that connected to that mental image is a mental feeling.
Yeah.
For Jack. And you'd commonly call it an emotional feeling of affection, say, right? Now that feeling you have, is it physical or mental?
That's a mental thing.
It's a mental thing.
Yeah.
And would you have any trouble recognizing it as being a concrete mental thing?
Mm-mm.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Well, notice what we've done here. Just common language. We've decided that physical things are concrete things, and mental things are concrete things.
Okay.
But now then, I'm inferring that you can, in your mind, this is what I'm going to bring in mind. In your mind, that's where you, and the mind is what I used to say, that's where you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, imagining Jack, the mental image of Jack, color, shape, and sound, and the feeling of affection for Jack, that's all in your psyche.
Yeah.
That you can also make us talk to yourself and say, I love Jack.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
notice that's a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
You've used word meanings.
Right.
Now there's where thoughts are.
Okay.
Now those thoughts, I want to claim, see, they're the abstract thing in this.
Mm-hmm.
But the mental images and the mental feelings, concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, concrete. But we use the word abstract for the thought.
Okay.
Now there's a quick little philosophical lesson that
No, that makes sense.
Where does it go? Yeah.
That makes sense. So is that the way that you kind of laid out the thought process of that, is that kind of how Dewey's philosophy works, or is like what that was kind of more so what I was getting at with Dewey, because I'm not familiar with him at all.
Mm-hmm.
So for a layman that doesn't have any experience with Dewey,
Yeah.
what exactly is his thesis, I guess you'd say?
Well, that's part of it. And I have in my book that I'm laying out what I've done with that. It all is implicit in John Dewey's pragmatism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using distinct between being implicit and explicit.
Yeah.
That's all implicit within the framework of Dewey's and other pragmatist philosophy. Now then, though, the essential thing is that for pragmatists, they believe that the consequences are, okay, so are you familiar with the basic physics concept of action and reaction?
Yeah.
So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, why I bring that up is because what pragmatism focuses on, especially Dewey,
Right.
is on the reaction part
Okay.
of the action, and hence the consequences of your act.
Right.
The consequences of human acts
Okay.
becomes the focus of the pragmatist philosophy.
Okay.
Not so much, as we say, the intention of the act,
Yeah.
well, what follows from the consequence, because that's what you actually can see with you can extrospect to see the physical consequences.
Okay.
So there's a beginning on that.
Okay.
Consequences.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that breakdown. I'm probably,
Yeah.
I've read probably about 90% of what you sent me.
Yeah.
And Dewey come up a lot, and that's one of the reasons why I want to
Yeah.
ask about it, because I'm not familiar with his work at all.
Yeah.
So it's something.
Well, you're not, except that every once in a while in political discourse, notice it, the word pragmatic,
Right.
and even sometimes pragmatism,
Right.
gets used.
Mm-hmm.
That's been happening for a long time.
Yeah.
And most recently, the word transaction is being used in political speech,
Mm-hmm.
talking about Trump's business orientation,
Yeah.
using the word transaction to refer to a business deal.
Yeah.
And that's what he's cutting all the time
Yeah.
to the consequence of him increasing his riches.
Yeah.
All right, so I just bring out that the word transaction is being systematically used
Yeah.
correctly for business, but not for human relationships in general.
Right.
All right, so in political speech, the meanings become systematically ambiguous and just used all over with no system at all to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're at, believe it or not, we're at about an hour in.
Okay. Well, I'm here to do with as you please.
Yeah. So I like to keep these episodes at about an hour. We will.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut us out and wrap us up here, but we will switch over to the personal side if we can get the computer to cooperate. I'm not sure if we'll be able to or not.
All right.
But I definitely appreciate you coming back on. Are there any final words of wisdom that you want to give?
Well, no, here's what my final word is. Because I admire and respect the work that you are doing and your subjects, your clients or your guests, whatever you call us.
Yeah.
I deeply respect them and what they're doing and the way you are doing that with them. That brings out more and more the pragmatist position.
Right.
Because these guys are got the consequences of their action is always in front of them all the time.
Yeah.
They have to attend to it all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm trying to I try to have a broad range of guests on. I think that most of the people that have come on have been entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I want to get more folks of like your background, like scholar type, or folks that are in some type of scientific fields. So, if you got any friends that want to come on, let me know.
Well, I do, and I'll allude to them again.
All right, cool. And I just enjoy having the conversation about people's life experiences and seeing kind of different.
And I'm going to come in and interrupt again. You do a good job at that.
Well, thank you.
You keep the flow going, and you move from one segment to another.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do. That's why I sucked at it at first, and I'm continuously getting better. Everything takes practice.
Practice, exactly that's a doing thing.
Yeah, is it?
It is. Praxeology, pragmatism.
So pragmatism.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah.
So this is a little off topic, and I'll wrap us up after this. But I do know. So I'll show you when we get done here. But I made this app, and a part of it is mastery.
Yeah.
So you probably heard the term or the phrase, if you do anything for 100 hours, you're better than 95% of the people in the world. You ever heard of that?
No, but it's the emphasis that you keep practicing something. You can get good at it.
Yeah, repetition, and repetition being super important to making yourself better in a certain area. Obviously, if you're repeating the same negative behaviors over and over again, it can go the other way. Yeah,
there's a knot in there.
Yeah. But anyhow, we won't get too deep into that because I know how we are. We'll go. We'll be talking another hour. But thank you again, Dr. Fisher, for coming on the show. I appreciate you coming. I'll have you on. This is not the last time you'll be on.
Okay. Well, I'm here. I admire it a lot.
Yeah.
Really. Yep.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll have you on more frequently. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe if you want to continue to see more content. If you want to be a guest, go to anythingandnothingpodcast.com/b-a-guest. Fill that form out. I'll bring you into my home. I'll set you over here, and we'll have a conversation about whatever it is that you want to talk about. Be it if you have a business you're trying to promote, some type of event you want to promote, or if you just want to have a conversation with me. I'm open to getting new perspectives from all different walks of life. So it's something I enjoy doing. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you guys, like I said, like, comment, subscribe. Subscribe's the big thing. I'm trying to get my subscriber count up. So if you guys could help me out there, we definitely appreciate it. But again, thank you again for Dr. Fisher for coming on. Appreciate you. And hope you guys have a good day and take care.